That's crazy, okay?
Yeah.
To forcibly conscript people to fight the Russians and to give people with no military training a very dangerous firearm. Uh,
Yeah.
this is the attitude of a regime that wants to see civilians dead for the photo opportunity. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, that's the only rational explanation for
Yeah.
this attitude because
Yeah.
it's irresponsible.
Yeah.
One thing, a soldier with a weapon, a well-trained soldier with a weapon. There's that saying, a Marine and his rifle is the most deadly weapon in the world. Very true saying. But you see, a
Yeah.
civilian with a rifle is a walking disaster.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Yeah.
the Ukrainian government is doing this, and it seems increasingly apparent also with how they are positioning weapons in the city that they are looking to cause
Yeah.
a civilian mass casualty event that they can
Mm.
blame on the Russians and use for their advantage insofar as
Yeah.
propaganda is concerned. Because
Yeah.
it's very clear that um, I don't know if this will get me into trouble with the local authorities, but I will only speak the truth. It seems clear that the Ukrainians will lose this war in short order. A lot of people I've noticed commentary in the West are saying, "Oh, the Russians are taking so long to reach their objectives, and
Mm.
they're losing the war." The no, the Russians are advancing very consistently and very methodically, and people in the West, especially in the United States, especially on the online world, don't quite seem to understand that. See, tanks move at about 20 miles an hour, maybe 30 miles an hour,
Yeah.
and that's on a breakneck pace, not actually fighting. If you have an army that is advancing 20 kilometers a day, as is happening now, you have a winning army. Okay.
Mm.
And so it seems that the people in the West are terribly misinformed and delusional, quite frankly. And
Mm.
they don't seem to understand that this notion of arming civilians is incredibly dangerous for the
Yeah.
civilians, and it's very demoralizing. The other thing that has been readily apparent is that the Ukrainian army or the political leadership or somebody is putting heavy weapons in areas that are heavily
Yeah.
populated with civilians, making
Yeah.
those areas a target. Now, if you park a couple of howitzers in the middle of an apartment complex, and I've
Yeah.
seen such pictures and they were verified, they are true pictures of what is going
Yeah.
on right now. Well, those two howitzers, number one, the Russians are going to want to take them out. And number two, it is inevitable that they're not going to be able to hit them with pinpoint precision because that's not the way war works.
No.
And because of that, a lot of civilians will be injured and killed. And so when somebody does this, an authority
Mm.
does this, the
Yeah.
only conclusion I can draw is that they want to see civilian casualties so that they can score a PR win and potentially use this to
Mm.
emotionally blackmail the West into joining this fight with the Russians. To tell you the truth, I'm outraged by this behavior by the Ukrainian authorities because it's dangerous, it's irresponsible, and it will cause needless deaths, especially when you realize that the Russian advance has consistently avoided targeting civilian infrastructure. Look at me now. I can prove to you that I'm in the middle of Ukraine, of Kiev. Okay, it's not just me making it up, and I'm talking to you on crystal clear communications.
Mm.
Why? Because the communication hasn't been knocked out. Cell phones, internet, water, sewage, electricity, they're all running perfectly fine, perfectly smoothly. The Russians could have taken them out in the first 5 minutes of this war. They didn't because they don't want to harm the civilians. And the attitude of the invading Russian army is very clear that they do not want to harm civilians. And this is in stark contrast to the American way of fighting wars. Because
Mm.
the Americans, and they keep saying this, they say that the Russians are losing the war because they are not taking out essential infrastructure. But you see, the American way of war is to destroy everything and then walk in. That's not really combat, that's just destruction and then later rebuilding. But what the Russians are doing is very consciously making sure
Mm.
not to hurt civilians. They are ferociously attacking military targets, but they are going out of their way to make sure that they don't have civilian casualties. There are people fleeing, there are a lot of people fleeing, but it's not the mass exodus that you have seen in previous invasions like the Americans have done, whereby you have millions of people all of a sudden fleeing all at once because the Americans have destroyed everything: sewage plants, electricity. Forget about cell phones and forget about internet. They've destroyed everything, which is not the way the Russians fight wars, or at least not the way the Russians are fighting this particular war. So that's my